All right, there are six major factors to an edit. Now, previously we talked about the kinds of edits. You get your cut, wipe, fade, um, dissolve, but we're leaving that. Now we're really talking about, as opposed to a kind of edit, we're talking about making edit decisions. Because every single cut is a choice, it's a decision. Someone had an idea, oh yes, I'm going to end a shot here and start a new shot there. And you need to have a reason why you're going to be doing this. And there are sort of practical ideas or reasons. There are very practical reasons for making an edit choice. Logical could be another reason you would choose. And then there are artistic reasons for choosing certain kinds of edits. The six major factors that I'm listing here, these really are more along the lines of your logical choices. These are not necessarily art choices, but they are logical. As you go through here, we'll talk about them. The first factor would be information. You want your audience to know something. Motivation. There's a reason to cut to something to show somebody. Continuity. You are making a choice to cut to one shot over another shot because they need a match. We'll get more into these things. Composition, camera angle, and sound. Now, as I said, these are mostly for logical choices that you these are things that you aren't necessarily thinking about, oh, what's the greater good for mankind? What is the look you're going for? What you're trying to achieve? Excuse me. These are logical choices. Sometimes they're logical choices in terms of analytical, in terms of things just won't make sense for your audience. Sometimes they're logical just because things just wouldn't things just wouldn't work or make sense without it. As you'll see more how this works when we're going through here. All right, the first one, motivation. With a motivational edit, you're telling your audience something they need to know by cutting from one shot to the next. So this is an example here where you see the girl looking at a piece of paper, and then you cut to a close-up of that piece of paper. Now it's probably hard for you to see on the slide, but if you're watching the movie and it was much larger, you see that's an invitation to a party. So this is information you want your audience to know. You want your audience to know, oh, she's reading about a party. And so this is informational. You're trying to give your audience information. Another example would be where in a film, let's say you see someone walk up and they look over at a sign on the wall, and you cut to the name of like a doctor's office. You go, oh, this person's going to a doctor's office, as opposed to if you'd seen the name of a lawyer's office, like, oh, they're seeing a lawyer. It's basically it's information your audience needs to have, and so you cut to it so your audience can see it. All right, that's information. Next is motivation. Something happens in shot A that gives a reason for us to leave it, and it makes logical sense to cut to shot B. That's what motivational is. In this example here, we see Woody Allen, who's a famous director. I don't know if you've heard of him anymore. You see him looking at something and reacting to it, and you're wondering, what is he looking at? And then way off down the way, you see his mother. And in this particular film, his mother is a very overbearing person, and so he knows that she's going to be embarrassing him in front of everybody at his office. So we are, as an audience, we're seeing him looking at something. And what is he looking at that's driving him, making him so nervous, so anxious? Then the next shot is we're motivated. We realize his motivation for being freaked out is that his mother is coming into this place. So a motivated shot is always a shot where an audience is expecting to see the next thing. It's a little bit different than information, because information you're cutting to it because you want your audience to know this thing. Motivation, you're cutting to this new shot because you're just trying to show your audience something. It's not necessarily giving them new information because you already know his mother's overbearing and makes him nervous. But it lets us see in him what we have a sense of why we're cutting away, because otherwise you'd just be staring there looking at him looking all nervous. And so you're showing your audience, giving your audience a reason to look away at something. Continuity. All right, continuity. You pick one shot and or to start on a specific frame over another because it matches better. You will most often be making this kind of an edit in an action edit, which we'll talk more about in a bit. But this sort of goes with cutting on action that we talked about earlier in previous lectures. In this instance, we're not necessarily talking what makes logical sense in terms of the story, in terms of giving the information, or because motivated. We're talking about, we're picking what frame to start on when we cut to. So when we cut from this close-up to this wider shot of him standing up, we are picking the frame we are leaving on and the frame we are entering the next shot on. I can't spell. Based off of continuity. We want his body language, or where his body is standing, see how his shoulder and his body is partly standing, matches how his body and shoulder are standing in that next shot. So it looks as if it matches when he's standing up. We don't go from him completely sitting to being halfway standing up. We don't go from him being halfway standing up to completely standing up. We are picking the frame, the frames, the frame we leave on, and the frame we enter in to match in continuity. We're picking that shot over another shot. We also do the same also where if we had one take here where let's say he had a, let's say in this shot rather, he was wearing a baseball hat, and then this shot he didn't. But we had another take where he wasn't wearing the baseball hat. You would pick the take they had the baseball hat. So continuity is a big factor in this. So mostly it's continuity of movement, but it definitely would be continuity in terms of making sure that you get it right on set, or that was right on set. And if one take the continuity is better than the other take, you go with you have to ask yourself, what is more important here? The performance or the movement or the fact that everything matches? So continuity will be another factor into making your choices on where to cut. All right, next, composition. Now this one borders on an artistic choice, but still really in this area, it's still based mostly off of logic. Composition is you pick one shot or frame to start on over another because a composition fits better. All right, so if you look in this picture, you can see how the girl is framed like a picture in the window, in that just her face is seen between her mother, who is on this side, and her father, who is on that side. So, from in the film, this is what's happening. Now, the director wanted to have this composition in here, and so the editor, when they were cutting to the shot of the sleeping child, thought that it would look better to start on a frame where you see the girl positioned between, sort of frame within a frame of the girl positioned between the two parents. We're seeing through them. So this is a choice that, because there's actually earlier scenes where maybe one of the parents covered her face a little bit more than before, or they could have. There's also a scene, part of the shot where her parents maybe weren't even in that frame at all, so it's just all the little girl, and it's very important in the film that we see all the family together in this shot, with the girl being the central focus. So she's framed within the parents, context of the parents. And so the editor picked this frame to cut into over other frames so that it fits better, so that it looks better, so that it shows what we want to show. So in this case, you could make an argument that a compositional choice is an artistic choice. And from previous lectures, when we're talking about composition, you know that. is a choice that has a factor into this, artistic factor into this. But as a factor of an edit, a logical choice for an edit, you are the art of it is that you know you want the character framed in a certain way. The logical part of this compositional choice is that you pick the frame that has the best composition in it. That's where it falls down to. All right, camera angle. You cut to shots that preserve the axis of action, and or another way is called the 180-degree rule. And you follow the 30-degree rule so that eye lines and screen position rather, stay consistent while not creating jump cuts. So what this means is at camera angles, you're making choices that make logical sense and you don't break that 180-degree rule line. And you also follow the 30-degree rule line, which we talked in previous lectures. Yeah, so camera angle, again, this is not an artistic choice so much. It's just that if you do have to cut between two characters, that you can't confuse your audience by breaking the 180-degree rule, unless you want to. Yeah, that's another option as well with camera angles, that well, maybe you want to break the 180-degree rule. But that's what it boils down to, is that you're picking one shot, again, as a factor. You're picking one shot over another shot because you want to follow these rules. So in this instance, you have an over the shoulder followed by another over the shoulder, and you're not breaking the 180-degree rule line. So camera angle, sound. Now sound is a little bit trickier. Sound, this is similar to a motivational edit, but instead of cutting to an image that makes sense from what you see, it is from what you hear. An example would be seeing a character standing outside. There is a sound of a car speeding up. We cut to a shot of a car racing down the street at our character. So sound, and so that this is one idea, one example of using sound as a factor of an edit. It's very similar to motivational in terms of the earlier one with Woody Allen. We see him responding and looking at something, and you cut to what he's looking at. Sound as a motivation for this can be as simple as then, it was said, you hear someone knocking at maybe you hear a knock at the door, you cut to the door being opened. You hear somebody off camera go, "Hey Bob," and you cut and see who said "Hey Bob." Now another one is that also that the sound has to be consistent from shot to shot. So let's say you're filming outside by the beach, and there are a bunch of seagulls sort of caulking in the background. Not so much that you can't hear your characters talking, but there's a lot of seagulls making a lot of seagull sound in one take. And then you cut to another take and there's absolutely no seagull sound. Well, as an editor, you have to make a choice. Do I just eliminate the shots that don't have the matching background ambience, or do I have to find a way to bring in that ambience? And so these are decisions about sound that you are making as an editor. I can tell you from years of me shooting in the field, it would drive me nuts if someone started mowing the lawn in the middle of an interview if I'm filming somebody outside, because then I have to make a choice. Do I have to film this before the person is done mowing their lawn, or do I have to wait till they're done mowing their lawn? Do I have to wait until they're done mowing the lawn, or do I have to try and get the interview done while they're mowing the lawn in the background? Make sure I get done before that person wraps up, because I want to have consistent audio in the background, because your audience will notice if there's a difference in presence of sound. And so it has to be consistent. And a lot of times you can work with this in post, where you make an editorial decision to add sound to make it match, and that also is using sound as a factor, because you were editing in sound. Or you pick one take, one shot over another shot, because the audio is more consistent between the two shots. So these are things that you need to decide. So it's not always visual when you're talking about editing. Sound, you're also editing just as much sound as you're editing video. All right. So those are the 6 factors. Now there are 5 categories for types of edits. Now, this is where we get more into the artistic side of it. The factors are more logical choices, while the five major categories, so you got factors and you got categories, these are more your artistic, and they are action, screen position, form, concept, and combined. So let's start with action. An action edit is the most common type of edit. So it is the most common type of edit. It is almost always a straight cut, sometimes called a butt cut. It's almost always called a straight cut, or just a cut, and it depicts continuous action or movement of subjects from one shot to the next. Time is unbroken from shot to shot. So an action edit is just your normal kind of edit. This that I'm showing here in this shot, this is also cutting on the action. And it's following continuity as well from the factors of decisions. But this is and you may be thinking it's just like a normal kind of edit. That's an artistic choice. You're choosing to make an action edit over another more artistic kind of edit. You're choosing to, as an artist, that you want time to be linear. You want time to be taking place in the moment, be unbroken from shot to shot. And so, as this really is the most common kind of editing that you're expected to see in like any sitcom, any comedy, any action movie. Within a scene, that's going to be an action edit. Now, when you leave that scene, if you go from that action scene at night and the next thing you know it's morning, that's not an action edit anymore. We'll talk about that in a minute. But within that scene, that's an action edit when things are happening all within that unbroken from shot to shot within time. Okay, screen position. Now, you may also think, well, what's the difference between this and camera angle? Well, screen position, again, it's an artistic choice. Sometimes this is also sometimes called a directional edit because it helps you direct the viewer's eye around the screen. There's usually one strong visual element occupies one side of the frame and casts attention or movement towards the other side of the frame. So this is an example from the movie Wanted, where we see Angelina Jolie looking very intent, and her gaze is very strong, and we know from our composition, lectures, that by having her on the left side of the frame, very strong, pointing that camera off to the right, and we see this person on the right side of the frame, sort of bookending it, she is cornering him and looking at him. So it's a very strong visuals cut from this shot to this shot. And again, you are being considered with camera angles as well, but you're not at the same time because these are completely different locations. And you could even argue they are breaking the 180 here to a certain extent, although not really. But you're building a very strong relationship between these two shots. And so screen position, you're positioning your characters in such a way that it makes a very powerful idea to your audience. You got that gun right here. You got a target right here. And everything visually is lining up to go towards him, and that gun is ready to be fired at this person. So you're making screen position, or as I say, also sometimes called a directional edit, because you're trying to get your audience to really get a strong sense of how these characters relate to one another. Form edit. Now this really falls along the lines of more of an artistic kind of an edit. Form edit is sometimes called a graphic edit. They are cut from a pronounced shape, color, or composition to a similar shape, color, or composition. This type of edit is often used to transition to a new location or time. If the transition is made with a dissolve, it is called a match dissolve. I'll touch on that again a little bit more here in a second. But essentially with a form edit, you are leaving one shot with a very specific, has a very specific look to it, and entering a new shot, which is usually a different time or place with a very similar looking shot. So in this instance, this is from Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. This is young Indiana Jones. A person is putting a fedora on his head, and he tilts his head down. In the next frame, just which was a straight cut, you see an adult Indiana Jones tilting his head up, revealing it's Indiana Jones as an adult now. That was a form edit. You could also say it's a concept edit. We'll get back to that in a sec. We'll talk about that in a second. But it's a form edit. We are matching the look of one shot to the next shot. Another form edit could be, let's say, a child is holding a lollipop, and you go into close up of that round circular lollipop, and then you cut to a tire wheel because it's round. So you're going from a similar shape to similar shape. If you haven't seen it, there's a great film made in the mid '80s called Highlander. Don't see the sequels. I'm not a big fan of the sequels, but definitely see, if you like those kind of movies, see Highlander. There are tons of form edits transitioning, because in that film it goes back and forward in time. It goes to the 1500s, then it goes to the present. It goes back to the 1500s, goes back to the present, because it's about a character who's immortal, who hasn't died. And whenever he has a flashback, there's always a very specific kind of form edit that takes you there. So that's a form edit. You're going from a similar shape or composition or color even, and you cut into another similar shape, composition, or color. Concept edit. Now, a concept edit, this is the one that's a little bit harder to get. Now, I already posted an interview with Alfred Hitchcock, who is the gentleman in this video. Or, I mean, on the slide here. Alfred Hitchcock, for those of you who aren't familiar, hopefully you are, was one of the greatest directors that has ever lived, as far as I'm concerned, anyway. And I already posted an interview with him where he's talking about a lot of editing concepts. He doesn't always use the same terms that we use, but the concepts are there. Now, concept edit. What is a concept edit? Concept edit is different shots with different content that, when cut one after the other, creates a third meaning. It creates a mental suggestion to the audience. I often call this the art of 1 + 2 = orange. It's 1 + 2 = orange, because this is where editing really stands out. Is because when you're making a concept edit, you can transform an audience opinion of somebody with an edit. This example that you see here, you have Hitchcock, close up. You cut to a shot of a woman and child, and then he smiles. You're like, oh, he must be a loving grandfather, or at least is thinking nice, sweet thoughts about this mother and child. This is an example here where he gives the exact same shot. Didn't even reshoot it. It's literally just editing in the exact same shot. Get a girl in a bikini, get the exact same smile. Suddenly you're going, oh, what a dirty old man, looking at that girl in a bikini. It's the exact same shots, but it's because the context of the shot in the middle puts a concept in the audience's mind of what this person is thinking. Now, you're using logic basically from the factors, because you're using a motivational edit, and that you're seeing what's he looking at, and you're motivated to cut to it. You also say you're giving information going along those lines as well, because these things are combined. They're not just a written in stone kind of a thing individually. None of them live in a vacuum. But the context that we put there between whether or not it's a child or a beautiful woman informs or suggests to an audience what we should be thinking this person is thinking, and what we should be thinking about this person. Should we like this person? Shouldn't we like this person? What's their personality like? Those are all factors in there, or actually these are in the categories. So that's a concept edit. The art of 1 + 2 = orange, where you line different shots up and they give a brand new meaning. All right. And then the last one is combined edit. And a combined edit is basically you're combining any of the previous shots. Oops, let me go back. Combined edit, and I apologize I don't have a slide for this, but a combined edit is, you could also argue this is a combined edit because you're combining a form edit with a concept edit. The form edit is obviously the hat moving up. The concept we're getting across is that he's moving from childhood to adulthood, and that this was a formative moment for him. There are lots of examples where you combine these things. All right, so that is the categories of editing for now. Thanks.